Excellent. Thanks a lot, Pete, and welcome everybody. I think, if welcome to Teams Nation. If you want to put questions in, we'll try and cover them off at the end. We've done this session a few times before internally at Microsoft, and we're going to try and get through this in a slightly shorter time than we've done it before. So good luck to us. So I guess first up, so my name's Al Erdley. I'm a modern work and security technical architect at Microsoft. I work in the Microsoft Technology Center. Ali?
Yeah, so my name's Ali Turnbull. I'm a cloud solution architect. Not quite according to the slide, but I am a cloud solution architect and I work on the partner side of the business. So my role is to help people build security practices and compliance practices on the partner side.
Just a quick call out to our Microsoft 365 security compliance user group that I run with Pete and Rue Campbell. Our next session is next week. So yeah, do check that out. So I guess onto the session. This session is all about assessments and compliance manager and how we use these. So Ali, do you want to go through why we use assessments and audits?
Absolutely, no problem. So if we can start off so this is a bit of a customer journey. So this is kind of how we see the journey from a customer's perspective. So this is a little picture of the CISO. I hope you like these drawings. They're courtesy of a brilliant colleague of ours, Becky Collerton, who is a grad inside Microsoft. But if we could just hold it on that particular slide there. Brilliant. So this is the CISO, and he sits in bed and he's kind of thinking, well, I have everything that I need to know about. I know about all the rules and regulations I need. I know about all the risks. I know about everything that I actually need to be worried about. But there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to compliance. So first of all, with all those rules and regulations, there's hundreds and hundreds of different rules and regulations to apply, including global, regional, industry specific, and it's pretty much impossible to keep up to date with all of those different regular changes and new controls. And also, if you do try and take on this challenge yourself, it's quite a manual process and an awful lot of time that you would spend kind of bringing all of those things. And then also we need to think about the risks that are associated with those as well. So are you liable to fines if you haven't put all those procedures in place and those procedures aren't sufficient? What internal risks do you actually need to consider with your data? So then once we know what regulations we need to comply with, then we can start to think about all that data and where is all of that data. So we've got all those different regulations. We've got, the little guy sitting there. Okay, I need to know about NIST. I need to know about GDPR. I know about whether I've partially met those regulations or fully met those regulations, and kind of have a path of where that goes. So on the next tab, when we know what we need to comply with, we then need to find all of that data. So first of all, we know those rules and regulations, but where is all that data being held? That could be held in servers on-prem, it could be held in the cloud, could be held on user devices, it could be held in loads of other different locations. We then need to kind of think about the type of data that we're looking for. So from HR perspective, PII data, health data, financial regulations. And once we kind of know about those, we can then determine what we're going to do to start to mitigate those risks. We can then start to map those to our data policies. And then, we've got to think about a couple of different things. We know, how long do we need to keep that data? Do we need to bin that data? Do we need to move it? Can we actually manage it where it's actually located right now from a storage perspective? Once we kind of know that, we can then start to classify and label all of that data. So knowing what type of data we have, we can label it. How long do we need to keep it for? Kind of putting in some of those regulation stamps that we actually need in order to meet those particular regulations. So this kind of leads me to where we have our Microsoft pillars. And I probably need to update this diagram a little bit to add in privacy. It's a little bit old now, but I need to kind of get that updated. But first of all, we have that information protection and governance. So once we've got those sensitive information types, we know what data we've got, we can then actually put in policies to gain control and increasing our security and compliance, reducing our risk. So, if we think about we can then start to kind of look at, say, insider risk management, which is one of our tool sets. And at that particular point, we can kind of go, okay, well, let's just say that we've got a user, she's actually working on a particular bit of data. So maybe Al and I are working on a project together. Maybe it's about trampolines. And what happens if he decides he's going to go and work with Pete? We want to be able to kind of keep an eye on what he's doing. Maybe he hands in his notice, and we want to be able to pick up when his behavior changes. So kind of using that user behavior piece, that user entity behavior, picking up that particular challenge, and when his behavior changes, being able to discover and respond to that, whether that being an insider risk management case that we would need to be able to do, or being able to make sure that that data doesn't leave our organization. So then we can kind of discover and respond and start to stay in control. But then we kind of think about it, is that all that we actually need to do? Is that, ideally everything that we need to do? Well, actually, no, it's not, because actually that journey starts again, because we have, 200 updates roughly a day from about 750 different organizations. We have new devices, new apps, new data types. And then, we've got to almost start that journey again. And that's kind of where that last kind of piece comes in, which is compliance management. There's one more tab there, Al. Brilliant. We can stay compliant and stay in control. So we want that journey to kind of almost not start again, but actually, companies to be able to stay compliant and stay in control. And then that kind of allows us to ensure that we close the gaps. Moving on to the next slide. We want to simplify that process for you to kind of trust in our technology. So we have loads and loads and loads of different Microsoft compliance offerings. We have the same from the Azure side of things as well. So we cover off, all the ISO, SOC. We've got the US government, the global, the industry, the regional. So we're really covering off. And I think at the moment there's like 200 and something different kind of compliance offerings that we've actually got in there. And we update them all the time. And, when new regulations come out, we're always putting those into the products as well. So back over to you, Al.
Excellent. So what's actually involved in an audit? When we talk about all of those compliance legislations and certifications, in most cases, an organization is not going to just kind of tick all the boxes and go, excellent, we are compliant, and stick a little logo on their website. There's usually an auditing process that they need to go through in order to prove to external auditors that they are actually compliant. So this certification process really starts when you actually identify exactly which certifications do you want to actually achieve. How do you want to achieve them? You find an auditor, you find somebody who is able to come in and do an external audit and say, yes, we agree that you are compliant with these requirements, and therefore we will issue you the logo to put on your website, and we will say that you are adhering to all of the steps and the processes that say that you are compliant. So the first step is really to choose, which compliance requirements do you actually need to adhere to. So all of those certifications will all have slightly different requirements, but you might want to bunch them together. But fundamentally, you're going to have a set of requirements that you actually need to achieve. What you then need to do is to measure your current environment. So what is it in your environment that is maybe non-compliant? Where are you actually already adhering to some of those requirements? And this can be quite a timely step, a cumbersome step to actually carry out, because if you think about all of the potential configurations that you might have in Microsoft 365, Azure AD, the way you manage content, there's a lot of different options as to how you can configure things. So you really want to have a way where you can measure that current environment. And based on that measurement, you can say, where should you make changes? So you can identify different improvement actions to carry out, because you really do want to just focus on what you need to actually achieve, rather than just thinking about, well, everything that you could actually implement. And, when we think about this, what is it that you actually have to then do? You actually have to demonstrate that you have carried out those improvement actions and that your environment is actually compliant. So the key to the certification process is really being able to prove to an external auditor that your environment is actually meeting their requirements, so they can actually give you that certification. So this is quite a complex process if you just think about stepping back and going, okay, let me just write down all of the things that I need to do, let me measure it, and let me work out the improvement actions. So how do we make this easier? Well, there are key steps that we kind of go through. So when we're working with clients around this, we're really looking at, okay, you choose your standards, you do that measurement, you identify the improvement actions, you prioritize them, you manage the implementation, and you measure the progress. So choosing the standards, it might seem like it's going to be quite obvious that this is the first step, but actually this is potentially one of the hardest things for most organizations to do, because they need to think about, not only maybe industry standards that they have to adhere to based on legislation, based on the regions that they work in, but they might have, more localized legislation. So if you think about the EU, we've got GDPR for EU and UK citizens. You might have HIPAA if you're in the States. You might have PCI if you're managing transactions. You might just want to demonstrate that you are adhering to cybersecurity standards. So things like NIST 853 or ISO 27001. Depending on your clients, you might actually have to demonstrate that in order to secure work for your organization. So there's a lot of different types of legislation and certification that organizations choose to try and adhere to. So once they're starting to look at it, we need to then look at, well, okay, what are the available assessments that they might have? So when we look at Microsoft 365, we're looking at Compliance Manager and we're looking at choosing the assessment templates. And what these do is basically say, okay, for these particular certifications that you might want to achieve, we have a set of checks that we can do and a set of associated actions that you might have to carry out. But you need to choose which of these you actually want to use. So which ones do you want to actually measure your environment against? There's 693 assessments there. So there are an awful lot of different assessments that you can choose from. And as I say, these are international. They're, some of them are global standards, some of them are regional, some of them are national. There's even state level standards in there as well. So there's a lot of different types of standards that we actually measure against, and we have assessments for them. And we're always adding more assessments in when we need to, when they become applicable. So lots and lots of assessments to choose from. And depending how many you're using, some of them are paid for, some of them are standard. So the other thing about these assessments is an organization might have a particular requirement or a particular need to measure particular levels of compliance. So what we can do is we can also create custom assessments, or we can extend them. So where there might be particular things that your organization wants to check, we can actually extend the standard template or create a custom template. So there's a lot of flexibility in here in terms of how we can actually use these and how we can tailor them. So they're not just sort of, okay, you've got it and you're going to have to use it the way it is. You can actually use that in multiple different ways. So assuming that you've chosen the certifications that you want, the legislation that you want to adhere to, you've chosen the appropriate assessments, what do we then do next? So the next part is really to measure the current status of your environment. So there's lots of ways that you could think about doing this. You could manually go through and check the settings that are set up. You could maybe run some PowerShell to actually look at it all. But actually, the compliance manager will go through and actually check all of this and tell you against each requirement where you need to actually carry out actions. So when we look at the assessments, so just looking at NIST, so we've got the cybersecurity framework in there as an assessment, and we've also got the SP 800-53 revision 5, which is always a mouthful. So we've got both of those as assessments within the compliance manager. And Within those, obviously those are both structured in slightly different ways. So CSF has 117 different controls, and the assessment is available in the Compliance Center. So we know that we can check that, and we can check that your configuration of your environment against those 117 controls. SB 800-53 revision 5, which I think I might just call SB 800 from now on, is a lot bigger in terms of the number of controls. So there's 1190 controls and control enhancements. So there's a lot of categorizations that if you were to go through that manually and go, okay, what do I actually need to implement? It would probably take you quite a long time just to go through and understand all of those and what they all mean and how you would implement them. So we have things, so we've got an assessment available in the Compliance Center. We also have things like the Azure blueprints. So we've got guidance on how you configure the Azure components that you might be using so that they are compliant with this as well. So both of those are different ways that we're trying to help organizations identify what they actually need to do and how they should be doing it. When we look at what that converts into in terms of improvement actions and recommendations, we can see that for the CSF, 117 controls turns into almost 1,000 recommendations. But for SB 800, we've got almost 5,000 recommendations. So there's an awful lot of different recommendations that are made based on the licensing that you might have, the SKUs that you have, and what you actually have in place within your environment. So it's a lot of recommendations that, again, you would have to go through manually to check. But actually, when we look at those recommendations, we're actually automatically saying, is your environment configured in a way that it should be to meet those recommendations, yes or no, so that we can actually then start to make targeted improvement actions for you. Now, you might think, how are there 5,000 recommendations for SB 800? Well, we need to look at the scope of those. What do those cover? Well, actually, they cover an awful lot of different products and different tools that, depending on the license types that you've got, you may have available to be configured. So when we're looking at these, we're looking at, auditing, we're looking at Azure, Active Directory, we're looking at all of the defenders. So, for App Service Cloud, we're looking at records management, information protection. So there's an awful lot that isn't necessarily just things that you switch on and just things that you kind of go, okay, we know that we've switched that on, so therefore we're ticked. It's more thinking about, how do you actually use these? Are they configured? And some of those other actions are really about thinking, how do you configure these in order to be able to switch them on? So how do we take this information, all of these different products, all of those recommendations, and actually turn it into something that is, well, fundamentally is useful? Well, we try and turn it all into scores. So we have, in Compliance Manager, we have your compliance score. So you can see there on the left-hand side, we've got the compliance score. It'll tell you how many points you can achieve. So if you implement all of those recommendations, it'll tell you how many you can implement in terms of your points achieved and how many Microsoft has already configured. So there are some things that Microsoft will manage and automatically implement. The majority will be things that you as an organization need to implement, need to make changes for, need to actually prove that you are making those implementations appropriately. And so you can see, what your score is, you can see where you want to work to, and you can use these scores really as a benchmark of where you are now, where you want to get to, and work with your auditors. Where do you actually need to be in order to secure that certification? And just on that, you don't need to be 100% to secure the certification. That's not the aim of these scores. The aim is not to be at 100% all the time. The aim is to have a North Star to actually guide you as to what you actually need to configure. So when we look at the compliance score, we're looking against those assessments. But then we also have a secure score, which is more around how you configure the security capabilities. So, you've got identity, device, apps in there. So some simple categorizations in there. And then you've got the ones on the right are both over in Azure. So they're actually in Defender for Cloud, which is looking at your secure score for all of the assets that you have in Azure. So it's not the same as just configuring your particular services as you would do with Microsoft 365. It's more about, well, what are you actually using and where do you actually need to make changes based on, whether you're using platform as a service, IaaS, or the components that you're using within Azure. And then you've got the regulatory compliance in there as well. So how you measure against those particular certifications. So the scores are crucial for how we actually allow you to help you measure your progress towards certification. So over to you, Ali.
Thanks very much, Al. So I think there was two other little slides just on that last one where you were before, Al, that you didn't point out. So we talked a little bit about the secure score in the middle. That's the Microsoft 365 secure score. So that's the one you'll find in the security.microsoft.com portal. And then the two on the right-hand side are the ones that we'll find inside the Azure portal. So inside Microsoft Defender for Cloud, or used to be known as Security Center, we also have a secure score inside there along with the regulatory compliance piece. So inside there where we can actually see all of the different rules and regulations that we can apply to the organization. So just wanted to quickly call those ones out. So when we kind of think about what we need to do next, we need to kind of start thinking about prioritizing those actions. So when we're going to prioritize those actions, we're going to look at improving those we're going to look at identifying improvement actions. So we're going to have a look at the improvement list that we actually have. So inside the improvement list, inside Compliance Manager, you'll see in here, we have a list of improvement actions, a little bit like what you'll see in Secure Score. So in here, we can see we've got those pending updates waiting to come down as well. So where we talked about in that slide where I said, you've got, thousands of hundreds and hundreds of different updates coming in every day. We're bringing those into the product. All you need to do is click on that little purple button there. It says pending update, updated, and it'll come down automatically. So that's kind of all included within the products. We've got the products listed there, so you can filter by different types of products. So if you've got different people looking after different products within the organization, within the IT infrastructure, you can actually sort by them, and then you can actually assign them to different people as well, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We can also see the order as to which of importance, which I think is kind of really key here as well. So we can see the amount of points achieved if we actually go in and tick off each one of those there. So we can see here that first one, if we actually go in and implement that block, jailbroken, I'm not exactly sure what the rest of it is, but we could see that we would actually achieve 27 points. So that would kind of add 27 points to that overall compliance score. So we know which ones are the most important ones and the ones that will have that biggest effect when we actually update that score. We can also see the rules and regulations for that particular improvement action. So a lot of the regulations will overlap with each other as well. So when you actually implement one particular action, it might actually update multiple different regulations. So we can see that kind of listed there as well. We can also put them into different groups. So if we wanted to have different groups for different part of the organization as well, we could do that. And we can also see different sorted by different solutions. So Al showed a different slide a little bit earlier around all the different products that we actually cover within Compliance Manager. And that's where that solutions tab kind of pops in there. The assessments is what we talked about a little bit earlier. So we can run an assessment for each one of those different regulations that we want to pull out. But this particular slide here is showing the overall improvement actions for all of the different assessments that we have inside our organization. And then we can actually see different categories. So managed devices, managed compliance, identity, or any of those. And we can also see the test status as well. So it gives you a really good view of what you might actually want to kind of look at and prioritize. So are we about ready to test? We can actually also add different types of things to that particular page. So we could filter by different types of things. So we can say which ones will be implemented, which ones haven't we implemented, and we can also export that as well. So I think that's kind of really key. Somebody asked in the chat whether or not we're able to export the assessments. We can also export the improvement actions as well as the assessment templates, and you can upload your own, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So if we move on to the next one, this gives us the opportunity to look at prioritizing those actions. So let's have a look at the different types of actions that we would actually, if we clicked on one of those improvement actions, we would get to this screen. So we can see here at the top, as I mentioned before, there's an update that we need to kind of pop in here. So the reviewing the updates, we can see which one is there. We can actually click on the left-hand side where we've got the overview. There we go. Updates are released when the technology or the standards change. Thank you. And then then we can actually also see multiple different statuses to help manage the implementation and support. So we've got the different groups there. We've got the different test status. We can see the points achieved. We can actually also see the high level guidance. So if we look at the 4 tabs that we have on the right hand side, we've got the implementation, the testing, the standards and regulations, and the documents. And each one of those we'll go into in a little bit more detail. But on the implementation side, we can see that it hasn't actually been updated just yet. We can see the actual, the implementation details. So we can choose whether we want to implement each one of those, or we want maybe an alternative implementation. Maybe you have a different product that you're actually going to be using that's kind of not picked up automatically by Microsoft. So you can actually put in their alternate implementation and actually put the notes in there so we can record it. So it's a bit of a mini kind of case management system. We can actually record what's actually going on. So we'll actually be able to kind of share that with the auditors as well. We can also see the implementation notes where I was pointing out now the step-by-step. So we used to have, if you were going to go and implement a particular change control, you would have to go and test it. You wouldn't know, you'd have to go and investigate what you would need to do in order to implement a control. We've actually made that a lot easier now. So we've actually got the steps that are updated regularly, tells you exactly what you need to do. So if you need to put that into, say, a change management control system, you can actually go and do that quite easily from now. But it's also got that single click to carry out that appropriate action in the tool. So if you click that launch now button, it will take you directly to the tool in order to actually go and make that change. So it's a really, really, really simplified and easy way to do it. We've also got that little button on the left hand side that says assign to. So we could assign that action to the particular person who's going to be able to go in and implement that control. So we're actually able to kind of really assign it and have really great case management over the particular change that we're going to make. So if we pop over to the next screen, we can actually see what we actually get on those other multiple other tabs. So in here we've got the testing, so we can actually click on the test status, and inside the test status we could say in progress. We could see whether or not it's been successful, whether or not it's been failed. We could put those testing notes, and we can upload anything else that we would actually want to be able to do. So we could link our change management system here. We'd actually be able to kind of really have a good view of how well those actual changes are going. We've also got the second tab, the third tab along, which is the standards and regulations. So we can see each one of those different controls that we're actually going to be able to implement in order to be able to manage this particular implementation. So we can see which one it would apply to. So in this one, we can see that we've got the mobile device policy is actually going to be affected, and that's actually part of multiple different controls. Not only the data protection baseline, but the ISO 27001. It affects NIST, both the two different NIST 171 and 53 there. So we've got lots and lots and lots of controls that would actually be affected, but we've got the ability to be able to see what we're doing and how each one of those is going to be affected as we go along. Passing back to you, Al, to show the Excel. Are we doing that?
Oh, I don't know whether I've got the Excel handy.
No, we don't. Sorry.
And I guess so one of the things, when we're looking at how we take this forward, we've managed the implementation, and the next thing that we need to do is to measure the progress. And one of the key elements that we have in this is we have the ability to download an Excel spreadsheet, which really has all of the information that we see in those improvement actions. But in addition to that, a large part of the process that you need to go through when you're having external auditors in is really outside of the remit of the technology. So it is things like documentation. How do people use the tools? What are your processes for actually checking and managing the outputs? How do you handle an incident if it's raised from these tools? So a lot of the actual elements that you need for an audit are outside of the improvement actions. So you can export all of the actions into an Excel spreadsheet. And that literally doubles the number of actions, because you will have those softer documentation and process management steps and recommendations that an auditor will request and that you should be doing as part of that certification process. But they're excuse me, they are things that are outside of the remit of the compliance manager and the scores, because we can't influence them. So with that, I'll hand back to Ali just to go through the process of building the compliance management, which is key to this.
Thanks very much. So this slide is really kind of talking about the different sides of compliance. So when we think about technology, we've almost got the technology challenges, the almost like the security side of compliance. So, looking at all the different controls architecture, the inventory, looking at all the vulnerabilities that we actually have within the organization. So kind of pulling out that posture assessment, the documentation and testing, running some of those kind of custom assessments as well. And then we've got the other side of things, which is more the advisory and the kind of law and the legal side of it as well. So kind of thinking about the regulations that we actually have inside the organization, thinking about the strategy, the controls mapping. So we have two different people that want to have these compliance conversations. Obviously, typically might start with IT and some basic controls that you would actually need to put in place in order to be able to protect the organization and kind of pull out those vulnerabilities. But then we've got the regulatory side of things, which is kind of more around the advisory and the law and the legal sides of the business. So across those different things, we need to kind of use tools like Compliance Manager to start to assess where is our organization, where are we up to within that particular, where is our compliance posture? What do we need to improve? And then we can start to kind of look at those controls that we actually have and kind of work down the tool set. And then we've got the verify. So verifying that we've actually put all of those things in place and being able to kind of be, the audit and the assessments being able to kind of come out in a good place, really, and being able to pass those assessments to get to those ISO regulations and NIST and being able to pass those. And then we kind of have that integrate piece. So thinking about how does that integrate into other systems that you might have? Do you want to bring in some of those other third-party cloud solutions and bring those into your organization? Do we want to do that by kind of uploading different assessments like we showed you a little bit earlier and building those custom assessments? Or do you need to have, other different tool sets in order to kind of cover off some of those other areas? And then kind of drawing back to that little diagram that I had back in the beginning is being able to manage it. You don't want to get to a point where we've done all of this work, the auditor's been around, he comes around more than once a year than they used to before. So we need to be able to kind of monitor and manage and kind of being able to respond to those things. So that continuous improvement, that advice on the regulatory changes, that continuous audit and assessment is really, really, really key. It's not a one-off thing. It really just kind of needs to be kind of continuous journey. So what other kind of things do we have within Microsoft to help you on your journey? So we have trusted resources. So the Compliance Manager can be found in compliance.microsoft.com. That's where we can kind of see that shared responsibility. We can see that our products are compliant. We can see that you guys as customers can actually see that you guys are compliant. We provide all those different resources, as we said, inside the tool set. So to look at those standards and regulations that you care most about. We can go to, we've got that built-in control mapping, and we can kind of identify those Microsoft versus customer managed controls as well. So I think that's kind of really key. The second part that we actually have is what we call the Service Trust Portal. So the Service Trust Portal is really, really important. That's where we keep all of our audit reports. So everything that Microsoft is responsible for. So if we think about us hosting all your data in our data centers, where do you find all of those reports to respond to, say, an RFP or to ask a partner for an RFP? Where do you get that information? So inside there, you can actually see all of our audit reports. What have we passed? You can see all the way down to our testing, where we might have, failed a test and kind of updated. You can see all of that information inside there. You can see the data protection, all the white papers, all the Azure security and compliance blueprints as well. You can also see all of the privacy stuff as well. So that, our response to data subject requests, our data breach notifications, if there were any, our data protection impacts assessments, and there's lots of other regional documents in there as well. So it's really, really, really key to kind of be able to have a look in that Service Trust portal. So how do you guys kind of get a little bit more into learning a bit more around what Al and I have talked about today? Well, we have an information protection and governance journey. This is kind of from a fundamentals perspective. I've popped in a couple of things that are kind of really key. So the SC 900, which I'll talk about our different exams in a minute, but those a couple of different SC 900 cover off some of those fundamental conversations. So if you're new to information and governance, then kind of look at those. There's some links in there. I'm assuming we're going to be able to share the deck, so you can see how long that will actually take. And then from the intermediate side of things, we kind of get partners or customers and partners to be looking at, say, the SC 400 exam. So that is an exam focused purely around information protection and governance. So it really kind of takes you through what do you need to implement Microsoft information protection, looking at data loss, looking at governance. So there's some really great tool sets in there, and it's all free and it's all online. So please go and do it. In addition to that, if you're already kind of really quite advanced along your compliance journey, you can look at our Ninja series. So we have a Ninja series which is written by our product group, some fantastic resources around say e-discovery, information protection, and we do have a really, really great resource from our compliance product engineering team called the One Stop Shop, and we've got some links in there as well. Just to quickly cover off some of the exams you could look to do if you were kind of keen to go down that particular journey. So on the next slide, we have those fundamental. You've uploaded it. I popped up one extra slide in there. I'll tell you. Didn't realize it had already kind of updated. I popped it in this morning. So there is one additional exam that I was going to call out. We will be releasing a new beta exam called the SC100, which is an advanced cybersecurity architect exam, and it does cover the compliance side of things as well. So that will be coming out in beta in April if you're all up for having a go on one of those. This is some additional compliance resources that you guys can actually use and have a look at. We've got plenty of other different kind of things you can go and watch, some videos. There's just so much information, probably too much, but there is plenty there for you to go and have a look at. What was interesting is I just popped into the chat a little bit earlier along is, give me a thumbs up if you already use the compliance score in your organization. I think it looks like we've got about 49 people on the call, including ourselves here. So only 3 people have given me a thumbs up that use compliance score within the organization right now. So hopefully today has given you a bit of a jump start around how you could use compliance score and think about using it inside your organization. Thank you, Nikki. Of course you do. You do always use it, so you just didn't get time to do the thumbs up. So so brilliant. But hopefully that's given you guys a bit of an overview around what you could use it for and how it would be beneficial to your organization. Is there any additional questions or anything I forgot to add there, Al?
No, I think, the exams, they're constantly changing and evolving. So watch out for syllabus changes as well for exams. But yeah, I guess, are there any other questions? I haven't been able to see the chat, so I don't know whether there's conversations going on in the chat and any questions to cover off.
Doesn't look like it from what I can see.
No, not that I can see either. I think we're all good.
Excellent. Okay. Well, in that case, what I would say is thank you very much for your time and for attending, and please do rate the session. We're always looking to improve our sessions. We're always looking to help improve the event as a whole. So yeah, do let us know how we did, and enjoy the rest of the day. Only another 10 hours to go. 10 hours chock full of fantastic sessions. So yeah, thank you very much.